So welcome to all of you who are here. If you want to share your video, that's always great. Then we can see your faces. Thank you for those of you who we can see. Welcome to, this is now our fourth monthly Opyrus Writer Conversation. And for those of you who have been here before, you're familiar with this, but basically what we've started doing is once a month, we have this great opportunity where I get to interview somebody in the writing, publishing world, an expert in that field. And it's a great opportunity for all of our Opyrus members to ask their questions, hear from somebody who is sharing their knowledge and their expertise in this field. I'll explain in a moment the layout of how we do these calls. By the way, I should probably have introduced myself. I'm Sarah Crisp. I'm the Chief Content Creator of Opyrus. And I'm also going to introduce you to our CEO, Art Gutsch, in just a moment. But so we started these a few months ago. Again, tonight is our fourth event. The other three are all accessible both in audio and video on the Opyrus site. So if you search opyrus.com and you just put in writer conversation, you'll see the previous three that we did. And we will be sending out an email probably next week to save the date for our fifth one, which is going to be on Sunday, August 22nd, with an author by the name of Tommy Schnormacher. So more information to follow with that. But very briefly, I just want to welcome all of you, introduce you if you're not already familiar with Opyrus, because this is also a great opportunity for people to get to learn about Opyrus and what we do. And we are really a self-betterment platform that is dedicated to helping people tap their power to write. We believe that everyone is a writer within. Some, that's a very clear connection. For others, it's something they may not have yet really engaged with, but we are really dedicated to making writing accessible and enjoyable and inspiring and easy. So that is, and really also to focus on wellness, because writing is such a phenomenal opportunity for self-betterment, for healthy expression, communication, and all these other wonderful, wonderful aspects within wellness. So I am going to, before I introduce you to our wonderful guest for tonight, Bruce Butterfield, I'm going to introduce you to Art Gutsch, again, the CEO of Opyrus, who is also a good friend of Bruce's. So he'll speak to us now.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. As Sarah was talking about writing, I get goosebumps because writing in itself seems like a very kind of innocuous thing. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. But it's really a super powerful power that we all have. And as Sarah said, we're all at Opyrus, we're all really excited about not only helping those that are already writers and understand what writing can do for them, but also for those that haven't figured that out yet, those that really don't understand why they should be writing. And there's a lot of people that fall into that particular segment. So we're real excited about what we're doing at Opyrus. Just a little bit of a kind of a plug before I talk about Bruce, and that is we're currently doing a WeFunder crowdfund on WeFunder. If you go to wefunder.com/Opyrus, we've been raising money for the company to build a brand new application called Write by Numbers, which is really exciting. And this is our last week. We're finishing out the crowdfund, and we really appreciate everyone's support if we have some of those investors on the call today. So with that being said, we're really lucky to have Bruce with us today. Bruce has been involved with the company for many, many years, and as what I would call a trusted advisor to the company. And Bruce, as you'll hear, is really so tuned in to the writing and the publishing industry, and you'll hear about his background, but he really understands, you know, kind of the not only the major components of writing and publishing, but also the nuances in the writing component of writing and publishing, but also in the what I'll call the technical components, the ins and outs of how to work with a publisher and what it really takes to become a successful author. And he's known quite a few in his day. So Bruce, I want to thank you for being with us here today. And I know we're going to have a lively conversation. I'm pretty much going to sit back and listen to you two. I normally talk a little bit too much. So thank you very much, Sarah and Bruce, and looking forward to the conversation. And thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you. All right. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to introduce Bruce and begin with questions for him that I'll be leading and he'll be responding to. And then we're going to open it up to your questions. So feel free at any point. You can send them to the whole, if you go into the little chat box, you can send it to everybody. You can send it directly to me. I'm going to take them at the end and we're going to leave a chunk of time to answer your questions with this. So I want to begin now by introducing Bruce Butterfield. It is such an honor to have you this evening, and it's especially, he has a very busy week with a wedding of your son, correct?
Yes.
This week. So we're especially grateful that you found the time to speak with us. To just begin, you know, his bio is unbelievable. He began his publishing career at Golden Press, and following that became a publisher for Scholastic. He later joined Pearson as president of Longman Publishing Group, expanding his role in educational publishing from K through 12 to college and adult ed. He next joined Paramount Viacom Simon & Schuster as president of Prentice Hall Regents, which is the world's largest publishing company in the English language and English language instruction for preschool through adult ed. Following that, he joined as a partner of Butterwood Venture, president of Virtual Ed, and now heads the Whitfield Group. And all three ventures are involved in education and publishing. He also helped establish Fast Pencil, which is a writing publishing tool that is part of Opyrus. He's a board advisor, as you just heard, of Opyrus and its LifeWrite charitable projects, which is how I originally got involved with Opyrus and met Bruce. And he's also involved with Noah Text, which is an innovative leader in reading literacy. During his career, he is strategically allied with such global companies as ABC, CBS, Collins World, CNN, CTW, LCA, Otto Meyer Verlag, totally probably botched that one, Purnell, PBS, 3M, and Warner Communication Time Incorporated. And for excellence in his career, he's been a recipient of a number of honors, including an Achievement Award from the Wall Street Journal. And he is a recipient of the Albert Nelson Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award. So it's unfortunate, you know, you haven't really been able to do a lot, you know, throughout your career. This is unbelievable. But I want to begin something that people probably are going to be surprised to hear. I know I was. I'm curious for you to take us back to how you first got involved in publishing, because my understanding is that as you went out of college, you were kind of on track to go into pro baseball, and you ended up instead doing a master's in education at Harvard, you know, because those are usually people's two choices, pro baseball, MA at Harvard. And then you went from there into publishing. So could you explain how that detour happened and why?
Sure, be glad to, and delighted. I just want to say hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us on a big Olympics night on NBC. So I appreciate your loyalty and interest in writing and in Opyrus. Yeah, I think had it been today in baseball when I was drafted, and had it been the New York Yankees, and I'm a lifetime New York Yankee fan, I probably would have signed. But in the 70s, it was the Pirates, Pittsburgh Pirates, nice team, but not the Yankees, and no $1 million signing bonuses. So I had written my senior thesis in college on E.B. White and his children's books. I love kids. I love education. I think education is the equalizer for everyone in the world, and decided that I would take a longer view about my next year leading to a lifetime of something. And education seemed to be a good stretch. And I went to to grad school and got a master's in teaching, became a reading specialist actually. And while I was there, met an interesting fellow who was responsible for the New York office of Golden Press, which is the company that had the largest children's publishing program in the world at the time. Pokey Little Puppy, all the classics that we're familiar with. And he asked me to join, and it was a very low-level job as a editorial coordinator. But boy, that was the best experience of my life. Golden Press owned its own printing presses, which is unusual for publishing. So I got to experience how books were put together, illustrated, written, designed, printed, distributed, and sold, and got to work on any number of projects. Sesame Street was first published by Golden Press, and that opened a huge door for PBS in that series. That was in the early 1970s. And ABC's Wild World of Sports did their first book. I don't know whether you guys remember Howard Cosell, but he was the TV broadcaster for that. So, and from then on, it's been a love of publishing and a love of writing and a love of helping people who wanted to write and had a talent get their work out for the rest of the world to see.
Amazing. So that idea of education and lifelong and making it available to everybody is actually a perfect lead into where you went from here, and something that I think all of us probably have very fond memories of, because from Golden Press, you started working for Scholastic. And I know for myself, Scholastic is something growing up, you know, getting the Scholastic, well, I don't even know what you'd call it, the advertisements, or you'd get to go home and pick your books, then the Scholastic book fairs and go to school. And it's such a huge part of my memory, actually, from elementary school, junior high. And I think so many people's connection to reading, love of reading, even beginning of reading in many ways is so connected to that. I am wondering if you can share some of your personal experiences, knowing that Scholastic was so innovative in making reading and really books equitable and available to children everywhere. Can you speak about some of your experiences with knowing and being involved in this kind of process of bringing reading to children throughout the world, or throughout the States, I should say?
Scholastic's a wonderful company. Where Golden Press sold their books in stores and were innovative in bringing it into drugstores and discount stores, not just bookstores, Scholastic actually reached through its various divisions directly to the kids through their book clubs. And those were monthly offerings that you got, and you'd take that home to your parent, you'd pick out books, and then the child would bring back money and give it to the teacher. And then the book fairs, Scholastic book fairs, which went to the schools. And I was asked to come on to, at the time, they were printing over 50 books a month, original books, to keep these clubs and all the interested kids reading. And they wanted to see if they could bring them into bookstores and get distribution there. So I came into trade to run their trade and institutional or library group. And I think where Scholastic was, they reached 95% of all the kids in the United States now. So hopefully there's no one on here that hasn't experienced Scholastic. You'd be in a unique 5%, and I'll try to find a way to get you involved so we bring it up to 100. But they're just a wonderful company. It's all about reading and literacy and moving reading beyond just something educational that you do for school to recreation, entertainment, and fun. When they had their book fairs, for instance, they would sell a book, but they'd also do posters and games to go along with it. And, you know, way back when Scholastic was originally forming, the book clubs were so widely known that kids used to brag about how many books they got from Scholastic and how much they read, et cetera. So it was a rite of passage to sort of brag about reading. So very, very unique company.
Yeah, I think that's something, being able to make reading cool, fun, something you would want to show off about, to have that club, to almost have that competition aspect is huge. That is very much my memory of it, you know, is something you were so excited to go and to get the books and all the other activities that went along with it. now that we're in such a digital age where our kids are so highly addicted to gaming and their cell phones, how now do you feel we can make reading still meaningful to kids and something that they want to be engaged with?
Well, I think it's something where parents have to be careful that they don't fight the technology. It is a tool, and kids are going to be on reading things, so it is a reading tool. But these are some of the things that I would suggest parents do, and it starts with reading together as soon as possible as a family. At birth, I can remember coming home from work, sitting in a rocking chair with our little daughter Liz at 3, 4, 5 months, and reading a book to her. And she had no idea it was a book, but she could hear my voice, and that then would lead on to doing that as an entire family, etc. So reading together, parent and child, through birth, preschool, and up to the teen years. Finding books on topics that the kids like. You can't force kids to read a topic you like or a classic, let's say, but you can get them to begin to love reading, whether it's sports, romance, science, and you can introduce some classics in there, etc. But let the kids have some freedom in picking the topics. Start a home library where every member of the family, parents and kids, select a book a month and put it on these specific shelves, and it becomes a family reading resource center. Give kids, if they get pocket money, give a portion of it that has to be spent on books or magazines or something that's readable, and just say, your pocket money is, well, I don't know what it is today, but back when I was a kid, it was 25 cents. So you'd maybe give them 50 cents and say, and the extra quarter is for a book, so that's what I'm giving to you for. And then remember that books can be read via ebook on a tablet, and that's a technology. So if they're playing a lot of games, you might just say, spend a half hour reading a book. Let me know what you're doing. So you don't fight it, but the way to get kids to love it is for the kids to see the parents doing it, and then talk about what they're reading.
Yeah. I love the
That's a start in any case.
of integrating the technology. Exactly. Because it is a shift. It's definitely, it's a different approach than growing up, going to bookstores and sitting and reading physical books and having that. So it's really essential to be able to switch that over.
Well, and it's very generational. I still like to read a newspaper in person, etc. But today's last two generations, they read it online and are very comfortable with that. So nothing wrong with that. They're still reading,
Right. So moving forward in your work in publishing, you've been involved with so many writers whose best-selling books you've helped publish, and likewise non-writers who you helped become first-time authors. When it comes to a writer looking to get published, what has been your way of determining, like, this is going to be a bestseller? Like, what is it that you look for?
Okay, first and foremost, there's no magic formula for a bestseller. I can just, by maybe examples, give you an idea of what might trigger a publisher and editor to say, I need to pursue this further. This has publishing possibilities. And I might start off with, if you have something that's totally new, but in a familiar field. There's a fellow named Doug Keeney, who actually was an ad exec in New York, but he had a hobby of war. That sounds horrible, but historical, World War I, World War II, etc. And his little niche that he brought to us was, he was aware that something could be classified by the government, but 50 years later, by law, it has to become public. And he would check every day to see what was coming public on the government website. And he noticed that US pilots shot down in World War II over the Asia Pacific coasts, when they came back, they had to write a couple of paragraphs on what happened, how they were shot down, etc. And those were just being released, brand new. No one had seen these before. The end result was he came in with a book, Lost in the Pacific, that had all these original essays. And they are just tear-jerking and heartwarming. It became a bestseller immediately, and still available in ebook, and just a perfect example of someone who hadn't thought about writing, but his niche was confidential. No one's seen it before. I'm bringing it to light, yet it's history. It's 50 years old. That did very, very well. Something that's crafted well, in other words, written simply, easy to read, covers the subject very well. And here I just wanted to mention, because it's a key for writers, if you should all have this one book, Elements of Style by E.B. White and William Strunk. And I might point out that see how thin it is? It's under 100 pages. I think it's 78. But in this book, they tell you how to formulate sentences and put words together. Fewer words, the better, etc. And I've always been attracted to a manuscript or an idea that's expressed simply and very easy to read, because that will reach the mass audience very, very well. Something that is, again, a brand new idea for an old subject, and I go back to Golden Press on this. There were many cookbooks out written by celebrities and all sorts of culinary schools, etc., but never sort of a complete library that one could go to and almost like an encyclopedia of cooking, be able to find what you were interested in. And Golden Press thought up the Betty Crocker cookbook series, for instance. There is no one author for that. Betty Crocker herself, her picture on there is actually a culmination of about 90 different features from 90 different women, so, and that became an immediate bestseller, and it was kind of a go-to. I know the recipes in there will work. I know I can find a recipe for something at the last minute. So that became a best-selling series. And I might mention a fellow who was on the original advisory board for Fast Pencil before it merged with Opyrus, John Kilcullen, identified the Books for Dummies series. He knew someone, I think his grandmother, that needed help in the financial side, the investment side. He just couldn't explain. He came up with this formula, and the first book out was Investment for Dummies. And that's become just a major line of books, but an original idea, simply written in areas that may have been covered before, new approaches. That's what will get you in. That's what will get you in. So there's no magic. And I mentioned the names of the people because they're regular people. They're not a James Patterson, incredible writing talent, or William Shakespeare. The projects I just mentioned were done by, we all could do it if we practiced and followed through on an idea. So no formula, it's original creativity and then execution. Yeah.
And that leads to the next question, because obviously I think one of the things we are constantly encountering at Opyrus is that people have a fear of writing. Obviously those who consider themselves writers and are involved in the writing field know its power, but a lot of people are really, really, really scared to take that leap because it does require a lot of vulnerability. You're putting yourself out there. A lot of people doubt if they have anything worth writing, worth saying. There's somebody else who can probably write it better. So what kind of advice would you give somebody who, let's say, either is a writer and wants to completely shift into a different direction with their writing, or somebody who has never really written or published before and they are thinking about trying to take that leap and take that idea and get it out there?
Okay, well, first and foremost, just get started. You can do it. You just have to say, I want to do this, and you start getting started. But a couple of more practical things. I always tell folks in particular that are starting out to visit a library and a bookstore and check out the books that you like, the format, page count, the size, a subject matter, and check to see who the publishers are. That'll give you an idea of who you might be writing for, and also what they've accepted in the past in that particular area that you might be interested in writing. And then check out the Literary Marketplace, which is a book that can be found in libraries and online, which lists every publisher and then the editor within the publishing house that handles children's books, cookbooks, novels, etc. And that'll give you the background to get at who you might try to formulate a book for, which publishers. Now I'd also add and join Opirus because it's free. And the Fast Pencil writing tool is just a phenomenal way to make the physical part of writing, getting it down and being able to play with it and edit it and work with it is terrific, the Fast Pencil tool. I mean, you can click a button and pick a typeface. You can move paragraphs around. By the time you're finished with that tool, whatever idea you have is going to look like a professional printed book. And that will build up confidence. Nothing like seeing your own words look like a book. And within Opirus, you also have Writing Light, which are podcasts and courses, which will help you, and the Caravan Network, the opportunity to speak with other writers and some in the fields that you might, like to write about. So it's always helpful to be mentored or talk to someone who's been successful. So those are some of the tools that Opirus has. And I guess I'd give an example. The other part is to continue doing it. A practice makes perfect. An example that I wanted to share, I'm sure you're all familiar with Raggedy Ann and Andy. My great uncle, Johnny Gruelle, actually is the creator with his wife Prue of Raggedy Ann and Andy. And that just came about. They never expected this to, be a best-selling sort of iconic property, but they used to tell stories to their daughter Marcella, and she encouraged them to write them down so she could read them later herself. And they did, and Prue did the illustrating, and look at what happened there. They just got started, encouraged by their, child, and came up with a best-selling series. So I don't know anyone I've ever met who can't write. We write thank you notes. We used to write diaries when we were in middle school and stuff, and we write thoughts down on pads. So we're writing all the time. It's just a question of formatting it and getting it in a form that you think others will be interested in. So hope that's not too long-winded for that.
No, there's a beautiful, one of my favorite, I guess, quotes is words from the heart enter the heart. That there's something about when you're being authentic, when you have something meaningful, when you're willing to be vulnerable and share, incredible things come out. And that resonates, as you were saying, if it's relatable, if it's understandable, if it's something that people can connect to and grow from. So the one thing I do want to say as a disclaimer is obviously it's really exciting to know about these bestsellers and to hear about them, but that the process of writing is transformational, that just writing and sharing is so huge to one's personal growth and self-betterment and to all the people who connect with it. And just as you said with Raggedy Ann and Andy, this was not with a motive, with a goal to create a bestseller, but to put something out there. And I know one of the things, the way Bruce and I met actually, and I want to just fill you in on this because it ties very much into this, is when I first got involved with Opirus, it was to be the director of the nonprofit division, which is the Life Right Project. And the goal of the Life Right Project is to create books, anthologies, bringing in different people's stories on different issues that are relevant to everyone. So the first book we put out, we're actually in the process of publishing our second one, but is the Corona Silver Linings Anthology. And clearly, as we all just have gone through and are still unfortunately dealing with this global pandemic, this was something that we wanted to create, this thought capsule where people were sharing their personal stories. And what came out of this was phenomenal because we have our youngest writer in this anthology is a 13-year-old, and our oldest, I believe, is an 85, 86-year-old writer. Or a lot of these people were not writers, but along with this, thanks to Bruce, we have Ridley Pearson, who's a New York Times bestselling author, who included a piece for us, and Astrid Shekels, who is also an award-winning child book author and illustrator, and Guy Gilchrist, who is an illustrator for the Muppets. So like, this is our book. This was put out by the Life Right Project with Opyrus. And Bruce, what was accomplished in that, which was so powerful, was for people who had never really written before, shared their writing, to suddenly be published alongside best-selling writers, and to see that their writing was moving people and influential the same way the bestseller, was with that piece. And so that's something, I just want to thank you publicly for your involvement with that. But this is a very long intro to the question. If you could share, any anecdotes of people you've witnessed whose lives were really transformed through them putting their thoughts into writing and publishing their book.
Sure, I'll try to give several examples, some individuals, some sort of companies or a project that was really worthwhile. From a company standpoint, I had mentioned that Golden Press published the Sesame Street books, but Sesame Street started off like anything else as a 1-hour show, very few viewers on PBS. And Golden Press saw the value in it and went and said, look, when the show's not on, kids still want to learn the concepts. They still want to fall in love with the characters, etc. You need to do books. So by that encouragement, once books came out, shape books, fragrance books, story books, etc., the PBS Sesame Street show increased its viewership almost tenfold within the first several books coming out. I found that very transformative. An example of an individual, I was introduced to a young lady, Astrid Shekels. We've mentioned the name a couple of times. And she just did beautiful landscapes. And on the side, she would tinker around with drawing animals that would be behind these landscapes. And I saw this and I said, Astrid, you should be writing children's books. These characters are wonderful, great stories. And she turned to me almost with tears in her eyes and said, but I'm dyslexic. I feel very uncomfortable writing. I even have trouble reading. And I just explained to her that a picture storybook is art and text coming together to tell the story. And she already had the art so beautifully done. She just needed to think through the few words that needed to be added to tell the rest of the story. And she plowed ahead, and her story is a remarkable one. She's been published by Random House and Islandport Press. And this is one of her first books, Hector Fox and Friends, and Hector Fox and the Giant Quest. And I thought it was pretty cool, besides getting the books out there and selling and feeling comfortable reading and writing, this is the Russian edition of her book. So it's being appreciated around the world. It's a global thing, but I keep thinking of her originally as someone who was not very self-assured in terms of writing and reading. And that was wonderful. Another quick example I wanted to give was the partisan divide. And this is just an example of, I had a roommate in college, Tom Davis, who eventually became a congressman in Alexandria, Virginia, for Virginia. And one of his best friends in Congress was a fellow named Martin Frost, who was Democrat. Tom was a Republican, Martin was a Democrat. And they sort of became known, but only in a small circle, the congressional circle, of being terrific dialoguers. They'd get up on the congressional floor and debate an issue, one with one side, one the other side, and then they'd come together and formulate bipartisan laws together, et cetera. And I just said to him, you have to write this down. I mean, the Congress, your fellow Congress people know about it. So they agreed to do a book, and this is the book, The Partisan Divide. Again, it became a bestseller. I think they were shocked. But the way that book works is they address 10 issues, let's say gerrymandering or redistricting, or they covered the baseball steroid situation. And Martin would start off in a chapter with his solutions and ideas, and Tom with his, and at the end of each chapter, they came up with a solution and did very, very well. Now, these are guys that thought they were great speakers, but writers, wouldn't catch them dead writing anything. But they had a heck of a lot of fun doing this, and it's still used quite a bit in the ebooks, still available as well. Another one I just wanted to give, if it's okay, because this is every day like you and me. Our kids, my son Tim and daughter Liz, had a high school teacher who taught a combo course with another teacher on American history and American literature, English. And he retired, but he and his wife liked to travel, so they visited, and they started visiting the homes where all the presidents grew up, not where they ended their life, but, you know, Lincoln's log cabin, and it's really interesting. And they took pictures, and he would write notes, and they finally decided for their family that they would create a book to share. This is the book, actually published by Fast Pencil and Opyrus. And now it's in all the presidential museum libraries, etc. He never thought that he'd be an author, but this is taking a hobby, writing it for your family and for your own pleasure, I would say, and then being able to share it with the rest of the country. And I just love seeing people not even thinking of themselves as writers, all of a sudden become writers and then share what they've worked so hard on, regardless of the audience. You know, when you write, you're also just sharing with yourself. And there's a lot of therapeutic value to that as well. You're getting your thoughts out. You can read it, your family, and then thinking of sharing it with more people is terrific.
And the same way we were talking about encouraging kids to read through the parents reading and reading together, that's something very much a concept we're trying to promote, you know, with writing for life with Opyrus, that writing should begin young. It should continue throughout life. And at every stage, exactly what you're talking about, when you're experiencing something, write it, because that is the way you make it permanent. You can always tap into that, and then other people can tap into that and relate to it. You know, I think that's one of the most phenomenal things with writing. I know as a writer, there are articles I wrote years and years ago that not only don't I remember writing, but I don't even remember feeling the emotions or the experience that I wrote about, but it can be completely relevant to somebody else who's going through that at this very stage in their life. Even though it was my story, it's no longer my story. Now it's their story, you know, so that connective ability. And I was looking up actually Astrid Checkel's piece in our book, which are also, you know, just, you can't really see them. I realize that here, but it's a beautiful way. You know, it was 4 simple things. It was wash your hands, wear a mask, keep your distance, and stay home if you feel sick. And I think even as adults, it's not just that our children are inspired to read when they see us reading, but I think even as adults, you know, sometimes when we think about our favorite Shel Silverstein book, or, you know, certain, The Giving Tree, or it's The Giving Tree, The Living Tree.
Giving Tree, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I'm like, probably shouldn't quote things off the cuff, but you know, that we remember, you know, that stump, whatever it might be. And a lot of it is the visual. So that's a beautiful way to bring it all together. So I know actually I saw a question come up. I'm going to take some questions, then I might, if I have a chance, ask you the last few I had for you, but I know one of the questions came in here about children's books. So one of the people on the call wanted to know if the same advice applies to children's books when you were talking about having an original idea, a new approach, familiar fields. Would you give that same advice to somebody who is writing for children?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there are tons of books that people write and present that have cute characters and tell a story, but it should be original, even if the characters are original or the way they react to things. I think children's books in particular, the art's so important and the story that goes with it. If we look back 40 years ago, the children's books like The Pokey Little Puppy are a little different than some of the ones today, which tackle very gently some of the social issues of today, which is inclusiveness, for instance. But a book with a bear, a rabbit, a dog, or whatever, all getting along, you can tell some really neat stories within that. But yeah, whatever I mentioned in terms of as an adult, you should be considering, same thing as with children's books. really no difference, except that the art, if you're going to do a children's book, make sure you have a really good artist or you're one yourself, because that's kind of important. Hopefully I've answered that in enough of a complete form to, if not, send another question in, we'll answer it.
So I want to ask you one more. I do want to encourage the rest of you, anybody who does have questions right now, please send them to me in the chat. And from this point onwards, we'll intersperse between any other questions I still had and your questions. So please feel free to get those in. I'm curious to know what kind of new projects, I do see with writing, with publishing, with, it's interesting, that you began with Scholastic and how you made reading so equitable to everyone. And it seems that fortunately that's really happened now with writing as well, which used to be limited to needing to publish in a very specific way. And now even, once blogs hit and, there's been more of an ability for everybody to not just, as much as we've been promoting everyone as a writer, to actually see, no, you can write and you can publish and people can read it, even if you never go the traditional book publishing route. So where do you see, what kind of projects are you, what does your future hold with publishing and directions you want to go with this?
Well, I think anything that qualifies under the heading of helping people be happier through writing, taking topics that they're interested in and just getting it out there in a written form. I wanted to give some examples of a few projects that I've been aware of and or I'm just beginning to work on. I play senior baseball now. Didn't go the pro ball route, but a bunch of us get out there and try to run as hard as we can and look ridiculous every week. But a couple of the guys, I believe there's a listener on, could be right now, Al Spector, who's a teammate who's written 2 books. I never knew this until he saw the invitation to the talk tonight and said, I didn't know you were in publishing. But there's another fella that I play with, a fella named Ed Wheatley, and he had another career, but he's always had a love of baseball, and particularly he's a big St. Louis guy. So he has this memorabilia and history of St. Louis Browns, St. Louis Cardinals, and some of the original Negro Leagues really started here in St. Louis. And he decided to put that all together in a book. And, here's the book. It's a wonderful book. And it was originally self-published. And get a load of this. All of a sudden, someone at PBS happens to see the book and they contact him to do a documentary. So they did a documentary on the origins of baseball in St. Louis, and he won an Emmy Award, and here's this guy, a teammate sitting in the dugout, and he's won an Emmy Award. He would have never guessed it. So helping someone see that whole process through and what an end result could be, and just having fun and sharing what he loves. That's wonderful. There's a project, also looking for ideas that are a totally new way to cover a very relevant topic today. And we've mentioned Guy Gilchrist, who is the main Muppets illustrator, stuff's in the Smithsonian. Is just a really wonderful guy. He's a songwriter. He lives in Nashville. He's a performer. He came to me with a project that had been brought to him by a woman named Lala Brooks. Now, Lala Brooks sang for the Crystals as a 13-year-old in the 1960s and 70s. That was a rock group, one of the more famous rock groups, and doo-wop. And she was recruited as a 13-year-old from the Brooklyn area to lead sing this group. And while that sounds wonderful, as a 13-year-old touring in the South, what she went through in terms of issues of racism, et cetera, were just incredible. And she said, a lot of my colleagues have written memoirs, mostly for adults. She said, I want to get this out to kids in a way that can uplift. It's truthful American history, but can be uplifting. So she and Guy talked about it, and they came up with doing a series of graphic novels for middle schoolers called Da Da Do Ron Ron, which was a famous song back then. And I just wanted to show you the pictures of it. This is a great book. It's so much fun, and it covers so much history that one can see a bad side to, but can be improved, etc. And a number of major publishers have just jumped on this. But the idea of taking it to a middle school, a young teen group before, when sometimes we think it's too adult to talk about, really intrigued me. So projects like that, I think, where someone's coming up with a brand new way to put it in writing.
Excellent.
Those are some examples. Oh, I did want to mention one other thing because it involves some papyrus. Since Scholastic has book clubs, I would love to see Scholastic and Papyrus partner, become strategically allied, and add writing clubs to the book clubs. And then you have the two elements of literacy, reading and writing, together. And I think that's a natural fit, and that's a project I would love to work on. And I think we have a good opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. I'm excited for our call when we can introduce that launch to everybody, because that is 100% a passion of mine and something I'm a very firm believer that writing, you know, we speak now about the need. And actually the next question I'm asking is from a teenage young adult writers, but that idea of the necessity to really focus on mental health, especially elementary school, and to make wellness a part of their education. And writing is such a phenomenal way to bridge wellness, mental health, education, all of these different concepts, communication, self-expression. So I'm thrilled with that idea, and we will definitely be continuing that conversation. But we have a question that came in. I'll read it to you. I've been working on a young adult book for a few months, but I have absolutely no idea where to start, if I could publish my book, or even who to speak to. How can I go about it? And then along with that question is, her question is 17 years old too young to be thinking about publishing a novel? Should I go for it, or should I wait until I'm a little older?
I don't think writing has any age limit. If you've got a great story and you want to share it, I would go ahead and do that. Like I said before, just really start putting it together. You might, again, want to visit a library and a bookstore and look at the young adult novels that are out there and who the publishers are, and read them and see which ones you like better than others in terms of style. And that doesn't mean copy them. That means just learning, I guess, by reading other stuff and identifying how you'd like to make yours a little different, etc. You can start by writing in the fast pencil tool and just putting things down, because you can move things around. I'm a big believer in outlining, which we used to learn way back in the 60s and 70s to do, but that's writing headlines for things you want to cover and then filling it in with the steps underneath, and then you transfer that into a narrative. And sometimes that initial upfront planning work is very, very helpful in identifying how your book is similar or will be different than other ones out there. I also tell folks publishing is a little different today, and it's not the concept of self-publishing per se, but anything that you put in the fast pencil tool, you can create an ebook of. And in some instances, young writers like yourself or brand new writers are actually writing things in the tool, forming an ebook, and they actually send the ebook on to publishers. And that shows tremendous initiative, and publishers are quite open to that. And I'd be glad to take a look at what you have too, and send you some suggestions. So, but definitely go for it. And that's not too young, never too young. I think there have been cases where someone started a blog, 12 and 13-year-olds, and they'd issue a chapter every 2 or 3 weeks. They became bestsellers. People would look at what the readership was on the blogs. Publishers have picked that up and actually contacted the writers and said, gosh, these are really good. Would you be interested in publishing a book or a series for us? And that's another way to start. You know, do a blog, do a serial, like a chapter a week would be in a written magazine. Do a blog story and put them together. And that's another way to get started. But just get started. I know you can do it. So get started.
And I know you're out there. I can't see the faces, but take him up on that offer, because I think that is the biggest thing. It's the just right. Just get it out there. And, it's only through the writing process that we end up finding the gems within. And I know there are many people who I've published throughout the years who never thought their writing, if it was a blog post, was sometimes something they were just sharing amongst family and friends, and then it went viral, and it went viral because it really resonated. It was really powerful. So along with that, we actually have a question that fits perfectly into. It says, would you recommend someone self-publish first before heading to one of the big publishing houses, and are there advantages? So you somewhat
yeah, that's okay. I think for a first-time writer, sometimes self-publishing is a help, only because you get to write your whole story yourself, get it down in writing. If you usually when you're sending to a publisher, you're sending an outline of a story and a sample chapter. And if you haven't been published before, so many of the houses today won't even take unsolicited manuscripts. So I think if you get it in the tool and self-publish. Now remember, self-publish can be an ebook. You can share. More people read ebooks than they ever did before, and it's another way. If you want to self-publish with a printed book, you can do that as well, but I would suggest you write it, get it done, create an ebook version of it, and that can be shared then with another publisher or with other people, and you can begin to grow your audience, so to speak. Again, those are a little general maybe, but definitely go ahead, get started. Yep.
I think you also mentioned something that I just want to really reiterate, which is that if you're sitting here thinking, I have an idea, but it's not really a book, and I don't know if I could flesh it out, that idea of starting small, writing articles, writing just essays, different pieces, it's amazing how they can grow and connect and develop. And the next thing you know, you do have a book. So like one of the things, that we have on Opyrus, we'll have a daily writing prompt. We'll have an idea. It can be a 5-minute writing exercise, because it is incredible what can come out and what that jogs and leads to once you start the writing process. So I don't think many people sit down and have an entire book fleshed out in their head of where they're going, even with that outline. And I'm sure, Bruce, you've seen that the outline can start one way and it ends up someplace else altogether. But just beginning the writing process can then lead, and it may not ever end up into a book, and that's fine, because the process of writing itself is going to be so impactful for you, or it absolutely could. And as Bruce has seen many times and shared with us, you never know, it might be a bestseller on top of that. So in just our last few minutes, a great question came in. Can writing change my life if I'm not a great writer?
Oh, I think absolutely. Writing really enhances our mental, physical, and even our financial welfare if you happen to sell. It's really a mental exercise. It's self-expression. Those are very freeing activities to do. If you take the time to write something down, it's easier to share with people. It's easier to text something on, email something on, whatever. It can be a collaborative process. You can work with others on that. There's a sense of community and diversity to that. And I think that is wonderful for well-being. I've often thought, I know we talk about writing being therapeutic because it's a release, you get down your thoughts. I suppose a psychologist or psychiatrist would say to someone who has something that's bothering them to go talk to someone about it, get it out of your system. That's not always so easy for some people, but if you write it, you're releasing it on paper. And that can be a tremendous help too. But I do like to think of writing even beyond that therapeutic, getting yourself to bear with something, I guess. I find it very uplifting. It can change your life. It can move you out of something that you're stuck in. And that starts by conversing, and in particular with writing. make a huge, huge difference. Just try it. You know, start simple. Like Sarah said, you don't have to write a novel. You can write a short story. You don't have to write a book on World War II. You can write a blog about one little portion of it. One of the programs that Art mentioned at the beginning that Opyrus is working on is the Write by Numbers. And that will be a menu of different writing prompts that help you in different areas. I believe the first app being worked on is called Moments. And the purpose of Moments is just to help you get down in writing something that you might have just experienced, or even identifying what might be worth writing about. Something happens in your day and you're thinking about it. It would be wonderful to have everyone take the next step and say, okay, I'm going to write that down. Even if I put it in outline form, even if I put 4 words down, you'll find yourself the next day expanding on that a little bit. But it's a very uplifting sort of thing, I think.
So actually, I don't even know if you're aware of this yet, and something that hopefully will be launched very, very shortly within the next week or so, and we can send all of you an email, but I'm just completing along with this concept of Moments and the Write by Numbers, but this is a writing meditation. And it's exactly what you're speaking about. In this particular one that I started with is healing through writing. And it's connected to COVID actually, and how we're all healing emotionally, physically, financially coming out of this. But it's intended to be, it's very short, 10 to 15 minutes. It is meditative in the sense that there's both an audio and you're listening to it, or you're reading it and you're writing, but where the writing is very focused. And it's exactly what you were saying, that afterwards you should feel uplifted. You've expressed it. You've gotten it out there. You've had to choose the words to describe what it is. And sometimes being able to just put things into words and express them helps us release them and helps get them out, and really can be transformative. So it's all really exciting. And I see exactly what you were talking about, especially, you know, starting with Scholastic and seeing this with children and their reading and their connection to these books and how it taught them, was educational. And now, you know, not that reading is passive, but if we're, let's say, going to compare it to writing, it's the more passive of the two, with writing being like the more active engagement, and marrying those in a way together to really just uplift and inspire and educate. So I know we're right at our hour mark. If any of you do have any other questions, please feel free to send them to me. I will put my email in the chat box, and I will make sure that they get to Bruce and to the writer out there with the young adult book. I really hope you take him up on that offer, and show him what you're interested in doing. And with the rest of you, we'll be sending you the link to this. We're going to be posting in the next few days the video of this discussion and the audio. And again, save the date for our next one on the 22nd of August. But I want to thank you all for joining. And Bruce, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise and your experience and your wisdom with us. I have found it fascinating to learn from somebody really on the inside how the process works.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I wanted to end with one little thought. If for whatever reason you think you can't write or don't know how to get started, I wanted to remind everyone of E.B. White's kids' books, Charlotte's Web. And Charlotte is a barnyard spider who befriends a barnyard pig, Wilbur. And Wilbur doesn't have a lot of self-esteem, and he's even wondering if he's going to be the breakfast for the farmer the next day. But Charlotte befriends him, and she helps him through writing. This is a really intriguing, sweet little gesture. While Wilbur's sleeping at night, spiders weave their webs, and she would weave a web every night for Wilbur, and in it would be some writing, one word, just one word. And I forget a number of the words she put in, but the one I remember all these years is radiant. And Wilbur wakes up the next day and he says, "Radiant, I'm a radiant pig." And he does a backflip and he gets all excited and he begins to, his whole life has changed. Now, if a spider can do that with a pig, we all, just one word, radiant, shared with someone, or one sentence or one piece of writing, we can all do this, seriously. And I know E.B. White felt that way, so.
I want to just jump on that idea that it was also part of a web.
Yes.
That it's all connected. I mean, especially now we talk, the World Wide Web, right? That we're all interconnected and interrelated, and that those positive, uplifting words that we may even be sharing just for ourselves or just for our friend have the ability to impact all of those around us, and all those we may never even know that our words have the ability to really uplift, as you were saying. So thank you very much. You have that was awesome, Bruce, from Art. I don't know, Art, if you're muted, but thank you really again for your time. Thank all of you. Thank you all, losing my words here, for joining, and we'll be emailing it to you very soon, so you'll be able to continue this conversation. All right, have a good night.
Thanks for sharing your evening, everyone.